Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be seeing which pollster was the most number one precisely accurate or spot on in the 2024 presidential election. If you guys don't know, I actually probably was the most accurate predictor out there. I correctly called all 50 states, 312 to 226 electoral votes, and that's exactly what happened. Obviously, I'm not a forecaster. I don't have any model, and I'm not a pollster as well. But I did correctly call every single state in this election. I just want to mention that. But today we're going to be saying which pollster, whether it's Atlas Intel, Rasmussen Reports, Trafalgar, Emerson, the New York Times, Bloomberg, whatever it is, which pollster was the number one most accurate in this election, and were they also accurate in the last election from 2020? So basically, are they consistent, or were they only accurate in this election and not really in the past? But before we get started, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss out on my content, press like button, share this video, don't forget we have membership. If you're interested, you can find the links to that in the description section. So as you can see right here on your screen, the most accurate pollsters of the 2024 presidential election based off the national popular vote. The most accurate was Atlas Intel, and they had Donald Trump up by 1.2% with the popular vote advantage, and the real number on election day was actually he won it by 2.1 percentage point, over 2%. Even though they were still off by about a percentage point, they still were the most accurate, but the most accurate pollster was still off by 1 point. They predicted he would win it by 1.2, actually won it by 2 percentage points. And then coming in second place, most accurate in terms of the national popular vote was ActiVote, which a lot of people say that was a pretty much right-leaning pollster. They had Donald Trump winning it by exactly 1 point. Obviously, even though they were the second most accurate, they were still pretty off by just about 1% because he actually ended up winning it by 2 percentage point. And then coming at third place is Qantas Insights. They predicted Trump would win it by 0.8%, and he ended up winning it by 2 percentage points. At number 4, you have SoCal Strategies, which I think is from On Point Politics and Red Eagle. I believe they work together. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. They predicted Trump would win it by around 0.8 percentage points, as you can see right here. And at number 5, it's Rasmussen Reports, which a lot of people say it's a right-leaning pollster, which it is true. I believe they are Republican funded, so I mean it is kind of true, but still they were at number 5 most accurate, better than any of these other left-leaning pollsters. Even nonpartisan pollsters like Emerson is considered nonpartisan, and they were still less accurate than what is considered a right-leaning pollster. And these are the facts. And what are the most inaccurate pollsters, which probably was one of the most left-leaning ones? Morning Consult inaccurately said Kamala was going to win it by 2. Trump actually ended up winning it by 2, so it was inaccurate by roughly 4 percentage points, and that was their inaccuracy. YouGov was extremely inaccurate as well, worse than any other right-leaning pollster, and YouGov is actually a left-leaning pollster. So in terms of which pollsters were more correct, was it the right-leaning ones, or was it the left-leaning ones, or was it the nonpartisan ones? Well, it actually turns out that what is considered the right-leaning pollsters were actually more accurate than any other pollster, including the nonpartisan ones as well as the left-leaning ones as well. So Atlas Intel was also accurate in 2020, I believe. I'm not sure about 2022, but they are accurate again. Number 1, even though they were still off by 1 point, according to the national popular vote in 2024. Now, let's take a look at the state-by-state swing state total. We're going to be using the Decision Desk HQ, The Hill. Based on the popular vote, as we all know, Atlas Intel was the number 1 most accurate. So we take a look at swing state by swing state, starting off with Nevada. So the Donald Trump won Nevada by about a likely margin of 6 percentage points. And the most accurate pollster was Atlas Intel. They had it at exactly 6%. As you can see right here in this poll, was conducted on November 1st through the 2nd. And they correctly predicted, they were literally spot on, by 6% for Donald Trump. So if you want to make the claim that Atlas Intel is a right-leaning pollster, well, that's your opinion, but still, they were literally the most spot on. So even though you say they're right-leaning pollster, well, it doesn't really matter at that point because they were the number 1 most accurate, even more accurate than the nonpartisan pollsters. And I'm pretty sure Atlas Intel is not right-leaning at all. It's nonpartisan, and they correctly called 6 points for Donald Trump in Arizona. And guess what? The real numbers was actually 6 points. And I would say probably the most inaccurate pollsters was probably Siena in the New York Times, which they had Kamala Harris up in Arizona by 3 percentage points. That's a polling error of roughly 9 points. So the most accurate was Alice Intel in the state of Arizona, and with the popular vote as well, by far, probably the most trustworthy pollster out there is Alice Intel so far in this video. Arizona, actually that was Nevada, excuse me, I kept saying Arizona. And the most accurate pollster ended up being Patriot Polling, which I never heard of before. And Donald Trump won it by 3.5 percentage points. That's the real numbers, and they called it for 4% for Donald Trump. Insider Advantage, I think, was actually more accurate than Patriot Polling because Trump won Nevada at the end of the day by a little over 3 percentage points, and they called it 3% for Donald Trump. So Insider Advantage and Patriot Polling was the more accurate pollsters in the state. I would say the probably least accurate one was probably Alice Intel, which they had it Trump plus 7. Obviously, it was off by about 3 percentage points, but not a single pollster, at least the ones that we're seeing from here, called Nevada for Kamala Harris. But if you do scroll down over here, then obviously just a couple called it for Harris, but Donald Trump had consistent leads in the state of Nevada. So in terms of who was the most accurate polling, it really depends on the state. In terms of the national popular vote, Alice Intel by far. In terms of Arizona, also Alice Intel. They have a very accurate, a good track record. But as for Nevada, it ended up being Insider Advantage and Patriot Polling, which I just never heard of before. And then we move on to the next state of Florida. So Donald Trump ended up winning it by 13 percentage points on Election Day. So in terms of which pollster was the most accurate, it looks like it's going to be ActiVote, which they called it 12% for Donald Trump with a very small sample size. And if you guys don't know, I don't trust small sample sizes. That's just me, but it actually ended up being correct. Well, just by a point, but it was the most accurate. And I would say the least accurate was probably Victory Insights, which I also never heard of, Trump plus 4. So he won it by 13, and the most accurate one, ActiVote, had him up by 12. So ActiVote was the most accurate in the state of Florida. And then we have the state of Georgia. Let's see which pollster was the most accurate according to the Decision Desk HQ. Donald Trump ended up winning it by just around 2 percentage points on Election Day. Guess what? Alice Intel, once again, just like a lot of times, is the most accurate pollster. They nailed it at 2% for Donald Trump. And then you have Patriot Polling. Also nailed it at 2% for Donald Trump. And I also was pretty accurate in Georgia. I had Trump winning it by a little over 2 percentage points. And that was pretty much spot on as well. And then we move on to the state of Michigan. In terms of who was the most accurate, well, Donald Trump won Michigan by almost 2 percentage points, just a little bit under 2 points. And it looks like Alice Intel, once again, is very consistent in terms of their accuracy by far more than any other pollster, including the nonpartisan ones, called it for Donald Trump by 2 percentage points, and they were the most accurate, as you can see right here. The least accurate, I would say, is probably Emerson, which is supposed to be considered nonpartisan, not even left-leaning, and they still had a polling error of roughly 4 percentage points. So Alice Intel is really doing pretty good so far. And then as far as Minnesota goes, Kamala Harris won Minnesota by about 4 percentage points. And it looks like Democracy Institute, with 350 likely voters, was a very small sample size, correctly called it for Kamala Harris by exactly 4 percentage points. And you can argue Rasmussen was also pretty accurate. She won it by about 4, and they called it 3% for Kamala Harris. The least accurate was probably a left-leaning one called YouGov, with a large sample size. I do trust larger sample sizes more than the small ones. That's what I do prefer, but it turns out that the smaller ones this time around were actually more accurate than the larger sample sizes. So YouGov had a 10 for Harris. Obviously, they were wrong. So the most accurate was Democracy Institute and Rasmussen. You can make the case for that as well. And then we have the state of New Hampshire. So Kamala ended up winning New Hampshire by just under 3 percentage points, a lean margin. And I don't even know where they got plus 28 for Harris from. That's like the craziest poll I've ever seen. I think that might actually be worse than the Iowa one from Seltzer. So I thought the Iowa one was pretty bad, but it looks like a Dartmouth College, whatever. Plus 28 for Harris in New Hampshire was actually miserable. So it turns out that the most accurate pollster was probably, I would say, Emerson, which called it plus 4 for Harris, but she actually won it by just a little bit under 3 percentage points. And you could make the case for Democracy Institute, was also a little bit probably on the more accurate side than any other pollster from the swing state of New Hampshire. And then we move on to the state of New York. Kamala only won it by about 10 percentage points, I believe so. And I would say the most accurate pollster, at least the closest one, was probably SoCal Research with On Point Politics and Red Eagle, I believe. They called it plus 11 for Harris, and I believe that's around the margin she actually won it by. So, New York pollster, SoCal Research, On Point Politics, that was the most accurate in the state of New York. And then you have the state of Pennsylvania. Very important state, called for Donald Trump, obviously, by 2 percentage points. And it looks like the most accurate pollster in the state of Pennsylvania was Trafalgar. And people argue it's a right-leaning pollster, and it is Republican funded. That is true, but still they were more accurate than even the nonpartisan pollsters by 2 percentage points, and they correctly called it. Same thing goes for Atlas Intel. They nailed it, spot on, 2% for Donald Trump in the state of Pennsylvania, and that was the final results on election day. It was 2% for Donald Trump. So Rasmussen and Atlas Intel. People argue all the time that those are the most right-leaning pollsters, but guess what? You can't argue if they're accurate, because they were, out of any other pollster out there. And then you have Wisconsin, another important battleground state. Donald Trump won it by just under percentage point, a tilt margin. It voted to the left of Pennsylvania and Michigan for the 3 Rust Belt states. Trump won it by around 0.8 percentage points. It looks like Atlas Intel once again called it 1% for Donald Trump, and they were off by 0.2 because they actually won it by 0.8 percentage points on election day, obviously. So Atlas Intel is consistent with their accuracy, and Insider Advantage also is probably one of the most accurate pollsters in the state of Wisconsin. So there you have it. And I would say probably the least accurate one was probably the one that says +3 for Kamala Harris. Research, that was just probably the least accurate one. And then the last and final state to look at in this video is going to be North Carolina. So Donald Trump ended up winning it by just around a little bit over 3 percentage points in lead margin. And guess what? Once again, Atlas Intel consistently, correctly calls basically every single battleground state, including the national popular vote. Donald Trump +3 in the state. And that was accurate. He did win it by over 3 percentage points. So once again, Atlas Intel deserves all the credit. They basically was the most accurate in all the swing states, and Rasmussen as well. +3 for Donald Trump, spot on. He won it by 3 exactly. Trafalgar and Rasmussen and Atlas Intel, which people argue all of those 3 pollsters are really right-leaning. Well, if they are, but they literally called every single swing state correctly. They were by far the most accurate. And apparently they're the right-leaning pollsters. So it turns out in this election, the right-leaning pollsters were the most accurate. So for anybody of you claiming that the right-leaning pollsters would not be accurate this time around, well, guess what? They were actually like literally in first place. Atlas Intel, which is not even right-leaning, by the way. Trafalgar, which it is, but it still was the most accurate. And Rasmussen were all the most accurate out of any other pollster, including nonpartisan ones like Emerson and the New York Times as well, which slightly overestimated Kamala Harris. So there you guys go. Once again, Atlas Intel at 1, ActiVote at 2. I forgot to mention that as well. Rasmussen at 5, SoCal Strategies at 4, and Quantus Insights at 3. Those were the top 5 pollsters. So in terms of the future elections like 2026 midterms to 2028 presidential election, in terms of the track record, I would say trust Atlas Intel. So if Atlas Intel continues to do polling in 2026, 2028, the future as well, I would say trust them. Because they were not only the #1 most accurate in 2024, this election, but I believe also in 2020 as well. So by far, Atlas Intel is basically always accurate. So that's pretty much it. One last final reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss all my content. Press the like button, share this video, don't forget we have memberships. You can find links to that in the description section if you are interested. Thank you everyone for watching.